All right, welcome to our 4 o'clock session, the last session of Tuesday here at PDMI West. I'm Thomas Hare, the Chief Content Officer of the PDMI. We thank you all for being here. It's been a great day of sessions. Our trying to save the best for last with our agencies on record session. This session, like all of our other sessions, is sponsored by Pacific Media Technologies. PMT has been our education sponsor now for 3 shows running. They have a video to share with you here.
I started PMT to apply the principles that I learned in the live television business to the DR delivery business. What makes PMT different is our people and their dedication to this industry. Quality is the key to what we do, and as the DR business changes, we'll be changing with it and we'll be ahead of the game.
Pacific Media Technologies. Technology driven, quality guaranteed.
So once again, thank you to PMT for their support. Agencies on record, we have some great agencies on stage here today. Tatari, Juice Media, BMG 360, all moderated by Brij, Shah from Comcast Advertising. We look forward to hearing their thoughts and their takes. Take it away, team.
Super. Thank you everyone for joining. I'm joined by some of the best minds in the media agency business. We all know the advertising landscape is changing rapidly. Lots of signal, media consumption, consumer behavior, but there's also a convergence of brand advertising and performance advertising. And we see that happening more and more so. So how are agencies navigating through some of these changes we see from a brand and performance as it continues to have some blurry lines? Would love to hear from you, panel, but before we get into it, can we introduce ourselves? Mike, take it away.
Mike Lyons, Chief Strategy Officer at Juice Media.
Hi, I'm Vicky Chang. I'm the VP of Media and Ops at Tatari.
Thomas Starr. I'm the VP of Media and Strategy at BMG 360.
Excellent. Before we get into it, let's give the audience a chance to know you a little bit more. So I'm going to do a quick this or that, rapid fire. You have to pick one answer. You can't say both or neither, all right? You're in San Diego, so salsa or guacamole?
Guacamole.
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 Stop. All right. Margarita or Manhattan?
Margarita.
Margarita.
Margarita all day.
Stop it.
Yeah.
They've practiced. All right. Barbie or Oppenheimer?
Oppenheimer.
Don't
do
lie.
it.
I guess Barbie.
Barbie.
Did you wear pink?
I do.
All right,
a lot.
There you go. Musk or Zuckerberg?
Musk.
All right. Brand or performance?
Performance.
Performance.
100% performance.
Well, what conference is this? This is crazy.
Yeah.
All right. So, seems like a very simple question, but I think it's important to, how do you define performance advertising? I think we all have a different version of it, and it's evolved. Performance advertising has been there for a long, long time. I would love to know from each one of you, how do you define performance advertising?
So starting with me, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
Performance to me, this is a category that we've created as an industry. The viewer doesn't see the difference between a performance ad and a brand ad.
True.
The way I define performance is how you're measuring it. And for all of my clients, I always build the brand through performance. So I'm performance oriented, we're measuring, and I think that delivers the best result for the client.
All right. What about you, Vicky? How do you
Yeah,
define
I
it?
feel like we're kind of, is my mic working? It is? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of on the same page, but you know, for us, performance is anything that can be measured. And you know, with what we do, it can be done on linear and MTT. So really anything is performance for us, as long as it can be measured and improved upon and iterated on and optimized against.
Yeah.
What about you, Thomas?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, the direct attribution. Everything needs to be measurable. You need to be able to justify and illustrate a return on investment. And there's many ways to do that. And I think it's about making sure you explore all alternatives. With radio and television a little bit more, with groups like Tatari being able to have attribution modeling in place to measure success. It's not that easy across the board on those two platforms, but I would say that any campaign that has measurable metrics and things are tracked is the performance behind it all.
That's, for me, performance advertising is whatever my finance team says it is. That's what I go with. Outcome-based is performance-based, right? So it doesn't have to be lower funnel, upper funnel, as long as you're measuring the right things. Does that seem like anything that's accountable, measurable, optimizable is the way you define performance advertising?
Yeah, I mean, even if you're talking about building a brand, you still want to be able to measure, even if it's top of the funnel, am I doing the right things? Can I improve it?
Right.
I don't think anyone's interested. I mean, you go back to David Ogilvy from Ogilvy on Advertising. Like, he talks about direct response advertising as being a way to measure the success of television. And he, couldn't be more of a brand guy than him. And, he points out the virtues of being able to do that.
So, question for you, Vicky. How are you navigating your clients? Thank you. Didn't like the question.
Is that me?
We'll find out. How are you navigating clients as there's more of a hybrid nature of brand and performance? It gets blurrier, it gets more converged in some ways. How are you handling that with your client set?
Yeah, I mean, I think with our clients, we've always had that question. A lot of our clients ask us that. For us, it's been a lot of questions around how do you look at it, how do you measure the two? And for us, it's always been measurable. So I think it's just more about when you're looking at media, like a lot of our clients will ask us, can you look at NFL spots the same? Can you look at a Super Bowl activation the same, versus something that you might buy ROS or cable? And, for us, it's all one thing, right? Because you're trying to drive people upper funnel to lower funnel, and, all of it can be measured. So I think for us, it's a lot around advising clients on how to look at things. So, for performance, you might be looking at something more like CPV based or CPA based, and then for performance, brand type of spots, you're looking at more things like reach and frequency, and how is it done over time? What does it look like over time? And you're looking at like response rates and those kind of things. So it's really guiding the client to look at the different pieces of media. That's kind of how we look at everything, but it's all performance at the end of the day.
Do you see sometimes clients, like in between the campaign, they'll go, "Oh no, I want more reach. I'm done with this. Like I need to kind of shift strategies quickly within the campaign."
Yeah, it's probably a little bit more around like expectations and timing, right? So something that's maybe more considered performance is just a more of an immediate response versus something like an NFL or like a Super Bowl that has, more, you'll be looking for delayed responses, right? You're looking at it more long term. So that's kind of, it's really just advising them on how to look at specific media.
And what about you, Michael? How are you navigating your clients between like brand and performance?
I think Vicky kind of touched on it. I think it's setting the right expectation, right? So setting up correctly and understanding what they want to accomplish really helps set the landscape for like, what are we measuring and when are we measuring it? So, Vicky mentioned the Super Bowl spot, right? That has a much longer residual value. So, the response rate may be X, but you're going to be carrying that out over a period of time and understanding that investment. A typical cable spot, you might look at 24-hour window and assume that if you only ran that one spot, this is basically the return you're going to get.
Right.
But I think everyone at the table understands the impact of multiple things, and that's really what you're driving at when you're talking to a client and having them understand a complete campaign. You want to understand the siloed approach of this did this, but overall, how did it all do? And usually you do a top down, or at least that's what we do.
Do you see a difference between categories?
Yes, definitely. I mean, something that would be a higher consideration purchase is going to be measured normally over a longer period of time. If it's free and you could respond immediately, you would probably give that less consideration. So we would use a much shorter window and kind of look at what happened yesterday to inform today.
What about you, Tom?
I think a lot of these points are covered here. I mean, it's really about managing expectations from the jump. There's a blurry line between branded business and performance business, but it's really not. I mean, at the end of the day, you can have a really brand-centric ad campaign that has a call to action or a URL, and it makes it viable option to play in that DR space. So I think that it's more so trying to work with clients and convince them that you don't need to have two buckets, really. I think that that's the approach we've taken, and in addition to looking at things holistically, we are incorporating, an omni-channel approach to support different pieces of their messaging.
So, what you mentioned before, the consumer doesn't know if it's a brand campaign or a performance campaign, right? Every interaction is an opportunity to build some brand resonance, and every interaction is to be able to drive to a sale. So you're saying that you're able to now have your clients not segregate or silo their budgets from brand and performance?
We have a handful that have come around to understanding that. We're also fighting the uphill battle like everybody else to have those conversations and try to level set, because there's really, I mean, at the end of the day, you want to be able to measure your investment. And there's certain areas where it's a lot harder to do so without having that direct attribution.
Right.
So if you could find a way to have very strong brand presence, but also incorporate something as simple as a vanity URL or a text code or a QR code, it's a game changer in terms of the general market business and the impact that this could have on that.
Speaking of general market, upfronts, always a hot topic, has changed quite a bit. Are you seeing a change in the upfront model, Vicky, to accommodate for performance advertising or performance budgets?
Yeah, that's a good question. We run into this a lot, actually. I think the upfronts, they work really well for a very set number of advertisers and clients, the way that it is done today, right? So I think for certain clients it works and it makes sense, and I understand why the networks need to do it. I think in terms of where it is today for performance advertisers, it needs to be a lot more flexible, right? There needs to be a lot more options given. It just needs to be more flexible with timing, and also the time frame, right? Having something negotiate a whole year ahead is pretty tough for performance advertisers. It's also tough in today's marketplace, right?
Yeah.
So much changes. So it's really hard to say and plan for something a whole entire year ahead. But it does work for some clients. I think we've always pushed the boundaries of options, timing, type of programming. Those are all things that performance marketers need. And it's not to say that there's not a need for it, because there are advertisers that do need to put certain things a whole year ahead, right? There's going to be planning cycles, and they need to have certain sports opportunities locked in, for example, and it works. But there's definitely a lot more that can be done with, options and just kind of all the restrictions that are placed in the upfront. So I think to open it up to more advertisers, it would be a lot more beneficial for it to be just a bit more flexible and a bit more conducive to performance advertisers.
And that's what we've heard, like flexibility has been super key. So are you seeing more and more network groups being open and adapting to that?
I think it depends. Some, I think, really understand the marketplace, and they have been flexible. And then I think there's others that are just, kind of set in what they've been doing. And you can see that, right, in the buys and stuff. So if they're more flexible, then it works better for our advertisers. And if there's not a lot of flexibility, then it makes it really tough.
You mentioned omnichannel, Thomas. Can you expand a little bit on how you're doing that today?
Yeah, I can a little bit. Yeah, I mean, BMG 360 as an agency at the core is an audio agency. Our roots are in audio, have been for 20 years, and television is something that's 6-7 years young for us at this point, but it's been a very big focal point and a big part of our growth as an agency. Over time, we've acquired other agencies to be fully rounded and be what would be considered a full service shop. And there's really no campaign where you don't want to have the opportunity to take advantage of all platforms. And linear television and terrestrial radio are still those top of the funnel mass volume drivers. And for 20 years, we heard everybody say, radio's dying, it's dying. No, guys, radio's thriving. It's still there. And radio and television support each other hand in hand. There's a dark cloud over linear television because of OTT. Digital audio came about, terrestrial audio didn't go away. So I think being able to work with clients, bring things to market, things that are existing in market on one platform, and being able to supplement them and bring them to another one, only complements a campaign and allows for scalability there. Utilizing radio to work your way into television is also a great path forward because it's a much smaller investment. Creative production's cheaper. You could spend less money and get a test in market, understand your call to action, your creative messaging, and then apply it to your television campaign. So I think more and more over time where we had been approaching business from strictly a television angle, that's not the path forward anymore. It's being able to provide all the services. So we have the offline thing covered out of the Barrington office in Connecticut, and we've made 4 acquisitions in the digital landscape where we can support a campaign from start to finish and develop landing pages and support their paid social efforts. We can then do their search, support their search through a team that does that. We have full in-house creative production. So we're able to help with the creative production across all platforms. So I think it's more so trying to fully integrate behind these clients and be able to take advantage of all the services that are there. So an omni-channel approach is vital to campaign success at this point.
Agreed. I think we talk a lot about the challenges like loss of signal, deprecation of cookies, attribution, currencies. What are the other challenges that you're facing today? Lesser known maybe, but really important to business. What are the challenges, Mike, if you can elaborate?
Well, I guess jumping on the omni-channel thing, the clients that I work with that I feel are the best marketers are the ones who are looking at a holistic approach to everything, so an omni-channel. And whether we're doing it or not, it's being transparent in that the outcomes. So having each silo informed on what the other silo is doing seems to me like a much more intelligent approach. And then the same thing falls off to the publishers. The world of walled gardens is really hard, right? So when things aren't transparent, whether it's pricing or it's outcome data, it becomes difficult not only for the agency, but it becomes very difficult for the client to operate. Now, if you have a monopoly, you can shut everyone off and just measure yourself, and you're going to be in business for as long as you're a monopoly. So that's its own thing. But transparency, even when you're dealing with a client who might have a best-in-class other agencies, for those agencies to communicate and understand how each channel is doing really boosts a campaign. Because whether you're in Thomas's scenario where they're doing all those things, or if you're in a different scenario where you're just a component of multiple things, it's much more powerful together than everyone operating in a silo and everyone reporting that their silo is doing really well. And when the client adds up all the outcomes, they outsize the total business, which is very common. So I think, in that case, they don't have to hedge and say, all right, well, I'm going to assume that this is about 70% correct. and take things down. They're going to be actually looking at real numbers and being able to make decisions off that. So I think that's transparency is paramount.
And that continues to be a challenge right
Yes.
now that you face with. What about you, Vicky? Any other challenges day to day that helps you kind of navigate between this brand and performance advertising?
Yeah, I think it's understanding all of the data, the different data sets, and then being able to put it together in the end, and actually have, you know, a client be able to form a story and a strategy, because there's so many different cuts of, you know, media that you're looking at. So be able to kind of look at everything together. I think that's just a big challenge, because there's a lot of data and a lot of, you know, ways to look at the data and kind of inform what you're going to do. And then I think the other one is just maintaining interoperability, you know, and making, like, you have new players coming into this space like Netflix or Amazon, and you know, they're going to be pretty big players, and making sure that they're kind of also sharing data, because, you know, even if you're managing a large campaign, but you have a section that's kind of blind,
Right.
It makes it challenging, right? So I think making sure that everybody is sharing data and that you can measure it is really important, right? But not everyone's going to be willing to do that, and then you have to figure out kind of where the gaps and filling in those pieces.
Too much data and walled gardens, right?
Yep.
What are you seeing?
I mean, we're seeing the same thing, and the data comes in all forms, right?
Yeah.
So having that holistic omni-channel approach to what we try to, you know, implement across the campaigns that we represent, it's not always that way. And we are working with other agencies at times, and there are different pieces to the puzzle that all need to come together somewhere. So, you know, as an agency, we have an operating dashboard platform and have our own customizable things that can pull each platform in to be in that visual. But there's no perfect science behind, you know, the terrestrial audio side still, and has never been. And on the TV side, things have progressed a little bit, but I think that that's still a big challenge, and being able to bring it all together and have it be, you know, maybe not everything's ever going to be perfect, but there's definitely got to be a more positive spin on things where you can be confident that across these 5 platforms, we've had spend across each one. Here's the data, here's the response, the revenue driven, and be able to make really strong assumptions off of that. And there's still a gray area there.
So then what do you look for, given all the challenges we spoke about, from your media partners, vendors, outlets, right? What do you look for, Mike?
That's a good question. You know, we're looking for, I guess, leaders in the space, right? So people who are thinking a little bit more progressively, like kind of getting back even to the tying back in the upfront. I think the upfront scenario was something that served its purpose, and locking down dollars does serve its purpose, but I think it looks a lot different now. I think the options look different. The understanding what you're actually buying will be different than it was, you know, 10 years ago. So, you know, as we look into all this fragmentation and we're trying to put everything together into a cohesive campaign, it's working with partners who are not only have impact, but also see things through a lens of a client and allow a client to have visibility into performance. Some clients, you know, some publishers that we work with seem a little afraid of that. Like, oh, might not show my individual network or you know, thing in the most positive light. But I think my assumption is every time I've seen that, they do better than they think they do, right? And so I think, you know, having the client feel certain about the outcomes that you're trying to deliver, nothing's perfect, things change all the time, gives them confidence into the spend. And so that's kind of how I tie that together. People who are really looking at not reinventing the space, but progressing, you know, and taking that next step and understanding that next important part to a media campaign that will basically encourage the client to invest more.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Vicky? Like, what do you look for in media partners?
We have a lot of great media partners. I think one of the biggest things, especially going into this year, is just a partner that really understands our clients and is willing to think outside the box a little bit, but also move as quickly as the industry is driving things. And I think that's going to be really key in 2024. I think all this the tech players that we're seeing, Netflix, Amazon, these are going to push the speed of how we kind of are used to doing things. So I think a partner that recognizes what clients need, but also is able to move as fast as things are changing.
Because if you don't, tech will push you.
Yeah.
Regardless.
I think with players like Amazon, Netflix, Apple TV, right? They're more from a tech world, right? And so they move very quickly. So I think the networks oftentimes have a little bit of a disadvantage there because they just can't move as quickly. So kind of whether or not we want to move fast or not, right? Because we're constantly being pushed by our clients every day to move faster, do things quicker, shorter feedback loop, time frames, and things like that. So, I think the networks that are able to kind of help us with that and help with our clients' speed of things are going to have an advantage.
Agreed. Talk a little bit about testing. I think rigorous testing often enough is essential to all of us, no matter what side of the table you're sitting on. Is there any new testing that you've done, Tom, that may have surprised outcomes?
I mean, I could focus back on the omni-channel thing because you could do a lot of testing across different platforms, right? But we've heard enough about that. One thing that we've seen a lot, and I think that it's been very impactful in the past year, is the use of text call to action, where instead of having somebody call a phone number or visit a website, they're entering a short code or dialing a keyword into a short code, and they're receiving a text back with a link to a landing page or an app download or a unique offer. And it gives you that level of direct attribution. And we've seen that there's a significant increase in conversion when you get somebody to engage in that text message. Those that don't convert, you have the ability to follow up to 2-3 times, and every time you could change your offer, entice them a little bit more before you fully lose grasp of that lead that you had. So I mean that's something that we've always dabbled with, but really it's become kind of like the go-to in terms of call to action in a DR ad for a radio test campaign specifically. But it's also on TV now. We're using it in OTT. So that's been a good test.
What about you? Any new testing you may have done that has been surprising results?
Yeah, I
findings?
mean, no, I think that, sometimes it's, we look at a lot of new technologies, which are all great, like QR codes made a comeback from the pandemic, I feel. There were easy ways to test things, but sometimes we go back to, doing controlled tests and understanding incrementality in doing a market by market test. Still, some of the solid things that we did early on still hold a lot of weight, and they really allow a client to understand, like, hey, what did this dollar do? And how much can I scale that? So as all the new things are great, but I think having a really sound testing strategy and presenting the client with that strategy, and there should be a testing creative strategy too, right? That should be laid in. It's not just network A versus network B, and I even say, like, that's not even that accurate. It's like, with a lot of my network partners, it's this network versus that network. I'm like, well, you're also competing against Meta, right? Like, a big chunk of this budget is going there. So there's actually more there if you're going to take out of that bucket than you take from your competitor set. So I think just having sound testing strategies across the board allow you to scale clients much quicker.
Do you think we do enough creative testing?
No. I think, personally, no. I think we, in the old-fashioned sense, right, people like to do focus groups on creative. I'm probably really dating myself. But, with the ability to do live testing and understand, this creative versus that creative, and then pulling the elements out of that creative and then saying, okay, we're gonna redo that. I think that we should do more of that. I think there's a lot of impact there that we're just leaving on the table.
I completely agree. I think more rigorous creative testing, when there's more loss of signal, the levers you probably have to pull is going to be contextual and creative. And I think going back to back to the future almost, like go back to old school foundational testing is going to be key, I think. What about you, Vicky? You test a lot of new different things.
Yeah. I would say something that we've seen lately is just, maybe it's not a surprise per se, but maybe it's something that people weren't aware of, is testing the larger spots, like sports spots, and being able to actually measure it. So I think that has been, like eye-opening for some clients because, again, you're not looking at it against, maybe like an ROS cable spot, but the fact that you can see, what an NFL spot did, how it did against certain matchups and things like that, whether it's on ESPN or NBC or YouTube or Amazon, seeing them across the different networks is kind of interesting with testing. And I also think just seeing that those higher priced spots and higher priced things can work. I think that has also been something that we've seen with clients is they're kind of surprised, like, oh, even though it's a high priced spot or it's a higher CPM, it can still work, right? It still has outcomes, and I think that's maybe not a test so much, but something that I think people are realizing can be done.
And it supports the brand plus performance narrative as well, right? It helps you.
Yeah, and even like, retargeting off of those large spots, right? Because, kind of what we were saying about might not be an immediate return, an immediate, show of, positive ROAS, but over time, if you're retargeting and kind of extending that audience, it can, the numbers can look much better.
We have a varied group of people. We have publishers, networks here. And, what is one piece of advice you would give us all, given your expertise in performance? What would you want us to lead with? Mike?
Yeah, I think getting back to the main theme that we have, that you can build your brand through a performance campaign, is fiscally sound to me, right? And it doesn't leave scale out of the question, right? Vicky just mentioned a bunch of ways that you can scale campaigns and retarget, have really sound tactics to growing a budget that will leave a client confident that they're doing the right thing, and that this continued investment is not only worthwhile, but it's profitable. And people talked about this at the beginning, like when you turn on even linear TV, things happen, right? And when I say linear, I mean cable and everything. But that these high impact spots have, things happen, and they're visible, and they're not invisible. And I think that really changes the paradigm. And as Tom said, radio's still around.
Yeah.
It didn't go away. So I think all these things are additive. And in this fragmented world, you really have to have a way of adding these things together and understanding their impact.
Did you give him wine? What is that? What about you? Like, what would you want us to leave with besides omni-channel?
Yeah, well, that. But I think it's really about being open-minded at this point, right? Everything is really fragmented right now. You just said it too. The audience that you're been capturing forever on the same linear networks all the time, they might still be there, but they're not just watching that linear network, right? So it's really about understanding your client's goals, number one, being able to align and identify with like a true customer profile, right? And then being able to do the research, look under the hood of every platform available, and identify what the best path forward is. And that does require a lot of testing, and you should be doing a tremendous amount of creative testing, especially early on. But there's a lot of learnings that could come from smaller investments and scale, accordingly. There's very few limitations in terms of how far you can scale a campaign if you have the right messaging in place and you're targeting the right audience base. So I want people to have an open mind about how they approach things.
Well said. What about you, Vicky? What advice would you give all of us?
I think
Or
maybe I'm
takeaway?
biased because of where we are, but I think everything is performance, right? I think at the end of the day, all paths lead to performance. So I think that would be the one thing I would leave everyone with.
Thank you. Thank you all. Great discussion, eye-opening. We'll leave it for some Q&A. If anybody has any questions for the panel, please.
Nice.
Okay.
Tired?
Hey, my name is Chris Harris. I'm with Audience Express. Some of the conversations that we've been having this week is kind of going back to the testing, and a lot of the conversations have been heavy focused on linear with slowly dipping toes into connected TV or OTT. I'm kind of curious your perspective, because some of the things we're hearing, we're not seeing the results right away that we want from OTT coming, especially from traditional linear. So kind of curious of how you approach that with your customers, and what is that test period look like for you when you're going into connected TV, knowing that you're not going to see those exact results that you see when you're moving some of that media mix into OTT?
Who wants to jump?
I can
Good.
take it.
Yeah.
I'll take it. Yeah, so for OTT, we can see results the next day typically. And what we usually do when clients are asking us about how to approach it is, we typically run OTT with a publisher for a certain amount of time, so that we lay in a baseline. There's a baseline of expectations, of performance, and then oftentimes for more, I guess, brand type of clients or activations, we do sponsorships within those OTT shows or publishers, and then we'll have a way to be able to measure that in the end, because we have a baseline that we set, and then the sponsorships are kind of laid on top, and so that's how we typically look at it, and we've actually found a good amount of success in doing that. A lot of the sponsorship type elements, whether it's a slate or a different type of creative or something that's a sponsorship leading into a spot, and we are able to see the performance between the regular impressions, I guess, and then when we run like a sponsorship or an integration on OTT.
Are you trying to tell us something, Thomas?
We thought Tom couldn't be the only one to have a drink delivery in the middle of the happy hour session.
Yeah.
True.
So we wanted to
Well,
make.
cheers. The question there too.
Hey, it's Long Ellis at Denali TV. I've got a question regarding convergence, and to what extent, when you're putting together a performance marketing campaign, are you actually looking at connected and streaming and linear simultaneously in terms of hitting a core KPI, like a cost per lead, cost per sale? And if you're not, to what extent do you want to do that? And do you think, should you do that?
You want to take the Tom?
Yeah, I mean, it's right away. We're not gonna let anything sit and linger and look to identify it later on. We're gonna try to make sure that we are pulling in the data against the delivery of the media spend from day one, and be reporting on that and getting into the weeds as soon as there's data available and any response behind those ads being set. I think that you have to be flexible and know that things do take time sometimes, and that you can't jump ship after 3 days. If there's life, there's life. There's adjustments that can be made. We're all in this because we have media partners, not just vendors. We have partnerships in place where we will adjust accordingly. And just like we want them to be transparent with us, if we're transparent with them, we could find that happy medium all the time. So no, there's no reason to delay anything. Work quick.
You're looking at a campaign
Holistically on a daily basis. Yep. And we're looking to make optimizations everywhere possible on a daily basis. And right now, linear television is the only place where there is a delay in terms of being able to make adjustments, on a day-to-day basis.
Hi, my name is Michelle. I wanted to ask a quick question about when you're placing linear TV and/or DR, how do you avoid duplication with a CTV OTT buy? What do you do to avoid duplicating the audience that you're running on linear TV versus CTV OTT?
I don't know if you can.
I mean, I think you would look at it in one way is that you have two separate measurement campaigns going. I don't know of anyone who watches CTV and linear TV simultaneously.
Yeah.
Right? So this part of it just works itself out. So if you're a phone and screen person, we have ways that we can see both the phone and the screen at a household level. So I think it's having the right lens to look through and see if I am duplicating this audience. And then the other way, obviously, is with capping frequency by household, right? So understanding that we've reached this household and we might not want to do it again. It's actually easier now with OTT to do that, not only on a household level, but on a device level. So, the bigger swath is the linear. Once you understand that, then tailoring the OTT to kind of complement that is actually easier than you might think.
And there really should be two different creatives, completely. The linear and OTT creative should have not many similarities.
Why?
Because OTT creative should be unique to itself. It should be more from that paid social scene, UGC, more engaged quick video versus what you could have on linear, right? So that's another differentiating factor there.
I kind of don't agree with that.
Okay. I like
to
that.
keep this interesting.
Yeah.
But, I think when the viewer in my house decides to watch a piece of content, they're not conscious of it. Hey, am I streaming this, or is this the cable box turning on? So I don't think we tailor the experience to that. But what I might agree with you with, if you were going to say we might do a different message to a phone screen than we would to a flat screen, I'd say that might be good. And you can test into that and understand it.
And I think that's where that all starts from, because it's the on-the-go viewing, right? Now that it's taken over your television at home, I think the way that those commercial breaks work and how the spots are inserted, it does require a different approach. And maybe you test it a little bit. You're a creative testing guy, you throw it into the mix and see what happens.
Different formats.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that outcome-based in general will kind of solve for that, right? Because you can't tell exactly what's overlapping and what's duplicating, but you can tell if something starts to fall off or something's not performing by publisher, right? And so you can look at average frequency and you can kind of tell from outcome. That's why I think outcome is so important, because you might not know exactly, but you know that there's something not working right on that publisher, and then you can kind of pull the lever up or down.
How you doing? This is Michael Weinstein. Question for you. What are you seeing, let's say, in the last 5 years or so in terms of testing? So when clients are coming to you with a new product, a new brand, a new campaign, and they're looking to test something, have the budgets changed that you're recommending and the time frames? Is it still 8 to 10K 1 week for a 2-minute and this sort of price point? Or are you seeing with CTV in the mix and other things now where you've had to change your recommendations in order for us to learn enough?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's really no cookie cutter approach to that, but you want to, in our position, we want to be approaching a new test from an omni-channel standpoint. So we don't want to be single-threaded on just linear television or OTT or radio for that matter. I think that each platform requires a minimum. I don't think you're necessarily in that, $5,000, $8,000, $10,000 we can get a test campaign off the ground anymore, unless you understood that you were going to be siloed to one platform only. Doesn't mean for $15,000 a week over a 4 to 6 week window, we wouldn't be able to generate enough data and learn across two platforms to be able to move forward with one or the other. So I do think you could still get away with modest investments, but you don't want to shortchange yourself either, because you run a $5,000 a week test campaign, you're not putting enough into market to actually understand whether it's worth it or not.
Excellent. All right. I think, well, thank you all for joining. I know we're the only ones here with a drink, so please go get yourself a drink soon.
Yeah.
Tom will tell you exactly where to go.
Thank you.